mentioned from the scans you showed on your screen share last night of him blitzing people up ahead of him while attacking someone else, right? And even let's assume that this didn't happen, right? Let's take the fact that it didn't happen. Let's just take your counter argument for some piece of integrity, right? You have to understand, if you're going to say that someone's mindset is affected by a certain condition, we have to show that this is something consistent of their character. We have no room to tell that this is something that he would be just completely caught astray off of or distracted by, other than the sense that, yeah, maybe someone normally would be distracted by that, but there are many parameters about Tanjiro's character, not even just Tanjiro's character as he goes about and fights multiple demons because he's a part of the corpse, but also the fact that demons have higher hyper awareness. So we're going to have to measure of how much their awareness would affect whether them in stress impedes their ability to focus, right? This is just another interpretation that I explained to you, and I wasn't done, sir, and I let you speak. So I hope you won't repeat what you did last night and server mute me in the middle of me explaining. Thank you. Now, to address your next point that you went on to state, you said previously that for some reason his perceptive awareness would be of some kind of high because he was distracted. I hate to let you know, but demons actually have way higher hyper awareness, which is not only something that goes upon the previous point that I went upon just now, but also the point that I addressed last night before the VC died. I had shown you many times to where Giyu has stated, and many of the the corpse had stated that demons actually get stronger in times of that, in times of like stress and in times of awareness, and they're more likely to lock in. So either way, I'd have more of a likelihood on my end. But my first point already really destroys most of what you said.
Did I hear within the Kokushibo point where I provided like an inverse example of like, I can agree to the fact that demons do have a higher perception compared to humans, and we can all agree that Tanjiro was a demon at that point. Pretty sure that's why you referenced it, right? But I gave an example in reference to the mental state, right? Tanjiro is lashing out. He's not like being his normal self, right? And we see when Kokushibo's in a normal state of mind, calm, cool, and collected, he's able to be hyper aware of things like Genya sitting about 20 to 30 meters on a pillar aiming at him with a shotgun, right? But when he's in an enraged state, he's no longer aware of it. He's only focused on the people closest to him in his vicinity, such as Muichiro, Sanemi, and fuck was his name? Guillaume. So I said I think this is more likely to be the case for Tanjiro as well, since he's even in a lesser state of mind. Like he's in a farther away from normal state of mind than Kokushibo was to his. So I think it just logically follow or just hold some kind of consistency to the fact that if you are in a lesser state of mind or if you're like less cool and collected, then your perception wouldn't be as up to par as in a regular state of mind. Like I think it's pretty evident via Tanjiro like lashing out.
We have to understand the conditions that would have to be fulfilled and true in order for that analogy or that comparison to hold exactly true to Tanjiro. First off, what I've already mentioned beforehand is the mental behavioral pattern of both of them. We don't understand of whether there were exterior factors that were affecting their mentality when they're enraged or not, since there could be multiple motivations to being enraged that affect someone's prioritization of who they're attacking or what tasks they're doing. And because of such a huge nuance, I feel like it'd be way too much of an extraordinary claim for you to say that this is something so consistent enough in so many events that we've observed that this would be something that's applicable to Tanjiro in this instance, right? You'd have to say that this is probabilistically the case, that he would in fact follow that way. But what is probability? We're just measuring the consistency of an event. So you'd have to get enough events that would measure consistently with a demon being enraged and then knocking off their focus and their hyper awareness, which is something that you cannot do off of one simple example. Because again, as I mentioned beforehand, there's way too many conditions that could possibly be affecting them. Their motivations, their level of anger, their level of ability and control over their anger, the level of strength they may have, and the amount of enemies that may be attacking them at the moment, right? There are so many factors that you would have to prove. It would just be so tedious and obnoxious for you to do such. To which, if you're willing to, you can, but I feel like that's just way too extraordinary to make such a claim off the bat. That isn't something that logically follows without fulfilling those conditions.
Yeah, can I hurry up and conclude?
Shut your bitch ass up, BZ.
Nigga, shut your ass up, nigga. No one was talking to you, nigga. I was talking
This isn't terrible to listen to, man.
Yeah, so what I was saying is that that's fine. Your interpretation kind of sounds like it's more from like a general standpoint with compared to the example I gave, which would be a little more analogous because we have completely similar factors, such as both of them are in a state of rage. They both have 3 to 4 opponents in their vicinity compared to one opponent at a farther distance that they're not necessarily fixated on, right? I think the analogous factors in question would be like Giyu and Genya were both outside of their range of their sword or their arms, I'll just say, right? But then you had the 3 Kikuchi and then the other 3 Hashira to like actively in his vicinity. So based on the perception, they're more likely to go for the people closest to them instead of fixating on the people farther from them, right? As well as the fact that within Tanjiro's case specifically, we don't have any implications that he was in his right mind at all, right? We don't get any internal dialogue, any external dialogue. He's just like mindlessly raging out, like flailing around. He's hacking and slashing. As compared to Kokushibo, we see that he does still have his thought process. He still like has his will
Give me a
intact.
second. I'll be right back.
All right.
I wasn't listening to the beginning. What's the topic, Vince?
He's like trying to get like you over DKC.
Is it crazy that I agree with that?
I mean, he said he can take either stance. I mean, I also agree that I can argue either position. I just think it's more consistent that fucking DKT is I think he said Giyu over Muzan or some shit. I think. All right, we started it yesterday. I forgot the exact fucking topic, but right now we're just arguing that like whether
I
it
don't know.
was
Demon sounds like that, but
we're just like actually arguing whether
All right, I'm back. Continue.
Andrew actually got perception lists or not. Oh yeah, so what I was saying is within the example I provided, I don't necessarily think it would be necessary for me to provide another example because within the example I gave, there are pretty consistent and analogous factors, such as, for one, in both examples, there were 2 to 3 people in that vicinity. Then you have one person at a farther distance outside of that vicinity actively trying to attack. Genya and Giyu are the 2 people in question, right? Giyu was at a farther distance than the Kinkushi. Genya was also at a farther distance from the Hashira, right? Then Kokushibo, in comparison to Tanjiro, Kokushibo's in an enraged state, but he still has his thoughts and his will intact, right? He still is under the impression of these people are a threat. I must eliminate them. I must kill them, right? Even though he is enraged, compared to Tanjiro, we don't get any implications of like internal dialogue or external dialogue. There, I don't think there's any implicative evidence of like Tanjiro having his will intact at all. I think his body is just like mindlessly reacting to the poison, not poison, the blood from Muzan. And I think it's just a natural reaction of that blood to start just like hunting for human blood, right? Because we see this when like Nezuko in the Entertainment Edition arc, when she like sees a human bleeding from her arm, right? She's not necessarily in her right state of mind. And that causes her to just like instinctively lounge towards the blood, right? That's the person closest to her. And her perception was kind of dulled because she was hyper fixated on something else. She didn't notice Tanjiro coming up behind, coming up behind her. Excuse me. She didn't notice Tanjiro coming under. I think that would also be another analogous incident towards like Tanjiro's perception being dulled down due to like him not really being in the correct state of mind. Yeah.
All right, cool. So I just gave an entire list of conditions that do not fulfill anything that you said. So it's important to take a look at these, and we're going to go through one by one. But first, I'd like to lay out a few definitions. So we understand the meaning of will is the desire, inclination, or choice of a person or a group. For you to say that he had no will of this, or that this wasn't necessarily, of him not having, or that he didn't have his will intact, this would mean that he had no motivation. And the reaction, and the reality is, as you can see here, you mentioned that he had in the natural want for blood. That's you saying that he had the will for this. Now, obviously, this is a bit pedantic because you could just simply be referring to his natural want, that he had no natural, like, of his normal mind. We're gonna get to that. One, the level of skill of the people they were attacking. This is something that we have to really attack, because obviously, if they're of different skills, it's going to take someone's focus more and more and more. We also have to compare the level of skill of awareness. If their awareness is at different levels. Let's say one's awareness is lower than the other. Then when they're at a super enraged state, let's assume that rage immediately knocks off someone's awareness for some reason, which also needs to be proved as well. Let's assume this is the case. I'm assuming that if someone's weaker and has a weaker level of awareness, when they're enraged, it's going to be even more weaker by that same logic, compared to someone who has such a high level of awareness and may not even affect them. So this is also something that needs to be addressed. 3, how much rage can affect someone's ability to focus, because obviously we understand that rage is something that's very, very nuanced. Someone's ability to focus is very, very nuanced on the level of training someone may have had and based on the level of experience someone may have had. So these are factors you need to compare to them and see if they're of such a relative level that their results would equate to being the same, right? Also, there's no implications that he's completely mindless. If we look up the definition of mindless, this would be in reference to having no sense of mind or no sense of conscious thought. If you're going to say that he had no sense of conscious thought, he wouldn't want to attack these people and think smartly and smartly defend himself against certain attacks. That is inherently having a mind and being able to understand patterns and memorization, which is one of the biggest factors of IQ, right? And this is a fact, which I can provide citations for as well. There's no proof that this is his simple natural reaction for just simply human blood. It could have been just a want for violence. It could have been just a want to fight. It could have been out of a sense of fear. There are many negative factors in instances that influence someone's ability and want to attack. And we see this and observe this upon animals, upon humans. And there are multiple factors within Demon Slayer we can compare as well if you want to get as close to the book as much. Also, demons have different levels of control over their lust for violence. So comparing someone's lust for violence compared to another, you have to prove that their lust for violence and their control is relative enough to equate to the same exact, conclusions. So those are all the factors that you'd have to in order for your full, argument to be logically correlative.
Yeah, that's completely
And I've also
fine.
sent them in chat.
It's just something right quick. Do you agree that there's a difference between will and instinct? Am I lagging?
I'm not lagging, so I don't know.
Oh no,
No,
I
you're
just I
lagging.
didn't know right now. Oh, I said I feel like there's another like external factor we would have to agree upon. Do you agree that there's like a differentiation between will and instinct?
It depends how you define them.
The way I would define it, I just think like will would be the manual thought of wanting to do something, right? So like, let's say I notice that I don't have any food in my fridge, right? Now I have the will to eat, I have the will to go out and seek food, right? But like instinct would just be something autonomous, something you don't have to think about, but it can still be the case. Like, let's say if I touch something hot, I don't have to think about moving my hand. It's just stimuli, right? It's just something that naturally occurs because my body.
Yes, there's a difference between voluntary thought and intuitive thought.
Yeah,
What else?
and I'm correlating that to the fact that Nezuko and Tanjiro were both at a lust for blood because of their biological structure, right? We see that like demons just have the innate want for blood, right? They don't necessarily like think about like, oh, okay, it's kind of like they do and they don't. They do think about killing humans at the same time. What we see in Nezuko's case, right? She wasn't even fixated on the blood. She's never ate a human up until this point. Then she gets a glance of blood, and now her body just physically starts heaving and like thirsting for this blood, even though she doesn't subconsciously want it, right? Or she's not like we don't get implications that she's thinking about, yeah, oh yeah, I want to like go eat this human, I want to go drink that blood. I feel like it's just a biological reaction because that is the demon's biological structure. It's just a natural thing. I think it's just instinct to keep it more simple. As opposed to like Kokushibo, I do agree with the point that there is a difference in skill within the two exams, like the Hashira versus like some random Kikuchi. I don't think that necessarily negates the point that they would be more fixated on the people closer to them in the vicinity. Because also, I would just bring up the point that Tanjiro was more out of his like mental state than Kokushibo. Because, like I said earlier, Kokushibo still was kind of composed, even though he was angry. He still knew what he had to do, what he wanted to do, how to execute it, and just a general understanding of his surroundings. There's nothing implying that Tanjiro actually has a understanding of his surroundings until the sun starts hitting his skin. Then the reflex of enter the shade, kicks in, right? So like with the Kikuchi, he swipes at them as soon as his army grows. That implies the blood has not been activated, and that is now his biological structure, that of a demon. So, as well as with the amount of rage that affects them, uh, I think that like in reference to Kokushibo and Tanjiro, I don't think Kokushibo was as angry as Tanjiro because Muzan did state that he's transferring his will and his blood and his memories and all that stuff. So I think Muzan would be more angry about losing compared to like Kokushibo just getting angry that the Hashira just won't die, right? I think it's just blatantly obvious that somebody would be more pissed off about completely dying and losing compared to somebody just stalling a fight. So that addresses point four. Point five about him being mindless. When I say mindless, it's in reference to manual thoughts, and like I said, it ties back to the differentiation between will and instinct, right? So, like I said, will would just be right. Some outside factor causes a thought to occur. Then that thought drives you to do X or Y, right? So, like I said, I don't have any food. I now have the will to go seek food. But I feel like it's an instinct case with Tanjiro, right? Nothing implying that there's any thoughts going at the moment. His eyes are white. I think within a fictional setting, I think white eyes just entail some kind of like lack of thought process or uh not a complete lack, but to a lesser extent. So I think that would justify the differentiation between skill and the opponents they're fighting. I think that would just make up for the difference. And I do think my example would still be analogous as to their perception being dulled down to the things within a closer proximity compared to just like their entire surroundings, right? Because like just because I can see a certain distance, right? Let's say I can perceive 15 meters, but I'm fixated on things 5 meters close to me, right? Yeah, just because you can perceive a set distance doesn't mean you're always aware of what's occurring in every single like just in the general radius. So like yeah, I think that addresses majority of it.
Oh, wow. So I'm just gonna send this in chat. Um, yeah, wow, that it disappointed me a little bit, but we'll address it regardless. So one, we need evidence. What's it called? That they were, what's it called? Composed, at least in such a sense, or that one was more composed than the other. In reference to, Coco, I need evidence that they didn't have action in such a sense that he had no actual voluntary movements. Which is what you're claiming, by the way, when you say manual. I need proof that Muzan would care more about losing than stalling a fight. Obviously, because they could have different motivations. Now, normally people might think, well, why wouldn't someone care more about dying than fighting? But why do people even care about dying? It's because they value life. Why do people care about losing? It's because they value a win. Why would someone care about stalling a fight? It's because they value the passion of the fight. Some people value the passion of the fight and value the fight of it in itself rather than the actual conclusion of whether they lose or whether they win. And we can see this multiple times within UFC fights and many fights. I mean, take what's his face? Something Hill when he versed Alex Pereira. He said that was the best he's ever felt, even though he was getting absolutely smashed in round 4, right? Eventually TKO'd. Like, let's just think about it. There's many instances to where someone's motivation can override an intuitive, motivation. And also I need proof that he lacked manual thoughts. I mean, you said that he had a will previously beforehand to do something. So that of it in itself contradicts your point. Um,
Mm.
your next point about no proof, or sorry. Your next point
Real-
about saying the white eyes leads to mindless rage because we see this in other mangas. I don't know what you were possibly thinking of with this, but that needs an extraordinary amount of evidence to such a claim. We obviously understand that authors' motivations and mindsets for illustrations can be so nuanced to the point to where you'd have to accurately measure the artist of Demon Slayer's motivation for such an illustration that would accurately lead and directly and necessarily lead to that being the case that when he has a mindless rage, he has white eyes. Also, let's assume that you're not making a deductive claim. Let's assume that you're being more, inductive, that you're not saying that it necessarily leads to the case, that it's most likely the case because there's a lot of illustrations of this within manga. Well, we have to also understand there's no evidence of this. Like, I don't
Well,
that there's a
so
majority instances of like people with white eyes in mangas losing their minds and going completely shit mode and just for some reason having a mindless rage. I actually don't hold to the commitment or the stance that this is a majority instance. So this would also need to be the case. Also, your final point about human perception, or where you compared, a perception of humans or perceptions of other people compared to demons, especially Tanjiro's. I already explained to you that this is gonna differ based off of experience, to which Tanjiro has a unique set of experience against demons compared to other demons. He has a unique set of perceptive awareness given the fact that he has musons, which is a lot different than other people's. Also, the fact that, he's been through so much, and now he has muson has been through so much. So obviously, in such an instance, we're dealing with a unique set of perceptive awareness compared to other people. That's why I said you would need to accurately measure it in order for you to compare it. Otherwise, it would just be like you saying, well, this guy did it, so the other guy did it, which is, it doesn't really hold to much evidence, just being honest. But
really quick, the first contentious thing is when I say like mindless, I'm not in reference to like a lack of manual actions or thoughts, right? When I say mindless, just to clarify, yes, you would still have some kind of like manual control over what you're doing in that moment, but it's in reference to like a lack of rational thought. So like mindless, for example, would be like let's say a person walks into a store and they're so angry they just start like flipping shit over and tearing up the store, right? I would consider that mindless because yes, you have control over like what you're doing in that instance manually, but there's like a lack of rational thought, right? So like within this case of like Tanjiro, yes, it could be the case that he's aware of what he's doing physically, but there's like no implicative evidence of any rational thoughts in reference to just like him being aware of the people around him. Like I said, I think that just leads back to the point of, um, oh, really, really good. You also mentioned like a human's perception compared to a demon's. I did use another demon in my reference, which was Kokushibo. So I still think that would hold some kind of analogous property, right? With Kokushibo being able to perceive the Hashiras when he was enraged, but him not being able to perceive Genya far away, right? He's not focused on Genya because he's in a pseudo rage and he's focused on the Hashras in his vicinity.